Should we turn the loop off?
Yeah.
I think it's okay, don't you? Or is it a bit too far away for you?
So,
Well, but anyway.
yeah. So thank you, Shwan. That was tremendous. I'm struck by the constant dialogue in the film between something to do with like two dimensions or a surface, and then these shots of streets and more normal kind of filming of real spaces. And I wondered if you could say, I'm sort of, I don't understand what it is. I mean, intrigued by that kind of patinated surface that appears with a kind of zigzaggy stripe through it that recurs in the film. And you're writing, but I wondered if you could say something about that shot of the kind of speckly.
Following on from what Jeff talked about, which is a relationship to the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an example of the relationship between sort of narrative or a series of narratives and the work itself. And this work remains very deliberately broken, strange relationship to time, whole pockets of time that seem sort of just held, and then the sudden bang, bang, bang with the editing. I don't know, this is not really a question, this is an observation, but it just proves to all of us that work runs alongside narrative. It isn't made up of the narrative. So in terms of what Jeff was talking about, the surface is also impenetrable. Every now and then you get just tracks going somewhere, so you get a bit of a line into space, but mainly it's wall upon wall of kind of impression and image, or sunset or sunrise. And in a way, it's great to have, because it's an examination, to have this account, but also it absolutely seems to have very little. There seems a gap. Is that fair? What about the gap between, this is leading, the gap between narrative and work? How important do you feel it is that we know?
I like what you wrote in the, I think it was on your website, or maybe it was in the articles, about this idea of broken and incidental moments of personal history. And I think I'd like to ask you about, we've been talking about narrative and storytelling. You're using this idea of the moment, these staccato moments. What got you to tell stories in that way? And really, as I don't know your work, how did you come to that? And also, has the pandemic changed the way you tell stories? So it's a two-part question.
Yeah,
And the second part of the question was the pandemic, the last 20-odd months, longer than that. It's actually 2 years, in China, but has that changed the way you perceive time, and is that affecting how you edit?
I was thinking about the fireworks and thinking that your whole approach to filmmaking is a bit like these kind of squares of light punching. You often use a small frame inside the large frame of the screen.
A vignette.
Yes, that's the word. And surrounded by the black space, so that all these scenes appear like little windows lighting up in a general darkness, which does seem very appropriate to the whole pandemic situation, lockdown.
And the parallel with the train, because if you're on a train, you have very limited space.
Yeah.
But this stuff goes like that.
Mm.
Like Zola, the murder being seen from the train. So this idea of being contained, but in a way hurtling through existence somewhere else. So it's kind of got that the travel aspect is a good metaphor for your and any impossibility to make sense to you're very separated from your past, and it looks a bit arbitrary, probably, like we all feel like. So it's very interesting. That's not a question. It's a simple question.
Anyone else got anything to say or contribute?
I find it quite interesting because I feel like a lot of filmmakers during the pandemic started using the old footages because they don't have access to like longer filming on site or thinking something was too much at that point. And I also during the lockdown and pandemic, I started going through like all the hard drives with full of old footages that I took like a few years back, and I just feel it's interesting because you're in London now, but all the footages are not from London. Most of them are not from London. And I also have a tendency to keep using the footages that I took like a few years back in Korea or the other place, which is not now and not here. And like the way you use movement and the way you choose your footage is like relatable to me, and I didn't just say interesting.
So clearly, I suppose it's obvious thing to say there's this sort of relationship to memory. That is like reprocessing recent experience and memory. And you also have that sort of, I think I very much like that sort of humming that goes through it, that it's like sort of almost inside your head or you in the bathroom or something like that.
I don't know.
Sorry to interrupt. Could we just open that? I know it gets cold, but could you open that window just a little bit to get a bit of? I'm aware that we're a lot of bodies in quite a sort of restricted space.
I'm sure everybody knows your work over this year and your film work. So, how would you say, how different is this film to your previous ones? Yeah, the one with the machinery and what's happened? What's changed between the loom one? Can you just characterise that and now this in terms of the difference for you, or the decisions you made to be so spare with this? Because we have, as Jeff says, we have lots of just blanks with just little moments, whereas that was kind of the film, the loom one, the image, the action was filling the space all the time. Can you talk about the difference? Yeah, because the early one, you do have time in it because we just watched this thing, so there's a conscious time. Whereas the recent one, all your footage, as someone was saying, it's like that is like a collage or a scrapbook of material. You've had this raw material from, i.e. your past, then a gap, and then that can be brought in. Whereas the other one was continual in some way.
Yeah.
Very interesting relationship to film.
But it's not just film, it's the images in relationship to sound. Because the sound is also a collage and also doesn't play by the conventions. Who's been influencing you over the kind of the last part of this course in terms of other artists or thinkers? I like the archive as well, because the archive by nature is political. So in a sense, you're self-archiving, but this could be fact or it could be fiction.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's something worth considering about this relationship with the self, and narrative, and archiving, and maybe that's the idea of the unreliable narrator. Because you have got this ability to convince us that this is a story and then follow it. You take us on a journey. And I'm thinking about some of your other works that I've seen from the photo. But I would love it if you could test that idea further about, you get dragged along by the person you don't trust and then they do something you do trust them on. I think there's something really rich there to kind of
fascinating. And in a way, what's happening now is that the film, basically these elements, these vignettes, are very much like the key to the map. And the map is just kind of you. It's almost blank. I mean, you're not blank. You're not in any way like that. But the way, the possibility is that there are these kind of archival elements that can be true or not, or whatever, we don't care. Down the side almost, and then there is the rest of space. There is that kind of empty space, which is so gorgeous to have that kind of sense of possibility that you project onto, that we do, and wonder whether something's honest or not.
Mm. I suppose there comes that moment when doubt overwhelms the viewer, and that becomes alienating. So there is a risk that you just push people away. They're trying to get involved, and then it's so obscure that you kind of give up.
Yes.
And I suppose it still then functions as a rather sort of formal arrangement of fragments. There was a fashion for painting that worked in that way, with highly dislocated fragments, like 10 or 20 years ago. But it sort of it defies any kind of narrative logic or feeling of identification.
Or singularity of point. God, Satan. About your work.
Well, we've said quite a lot, but or you've said quite a lot. But
we should be asking questions.
But I think I'm just checking online to see if anyone's
said too
got any.
much? I'm not asking enough.
No, I think that's pretty good. I mean, I hope we've expressed our very positive sort of reactions to your work in general, and our respect for the craft that you've applied to what you do in terms of the timing, the consideration of the space of the screen, and a sort of a rather kind of gentle engagement with your own life and other people's sort of activities and that.
And generally the idea of the ordinary, which is a bit of a myth anyway, and I feel the work is often about sort of everyone as well, sort of sense of normality, which of course is not normal at all. It seems normal, but there's play on that, which is something to think about. The everyday, but
a terrific presentation to start with, and but I usually start these because I was so engaged with various technical problems. I didn't get a chance to say, thank you for everyone for turning up to this in person, and this is meant to be a kind of a celebration of your achievements as much as assessment points or anything like that. And we I again apologise for all the technical shortcomings, but it won't reflect. Nobody can fall down because of what happens in the presentations. We have your research files, we have our knowledge of your past work, and so what happens here today can only sort of take you higher in terms of the assessments.
The presentation is also the art.
Yeah.